Good evening, everyone. So tonight we welcome back Dr. Mark Pestana, who almost 2 years ago now provided a lot of clarity around the topic of the problem of evil. The topic tonight is going to be also very enticing. The whole truth and nothing but the truth. The nature of truth and truth-telling. If you don't know who Dr. Mark Pestana is, he's a parishioner here at Sacred Heart. He's a professor of philosophy at Grand Valley. He earned his PhD in philosophy at the University of Chicago and an MA at the University of Kentucky. His interests are in ethics, medieval philosophy, metaphysics, and philosophy of mind. He is also the author of the book Moral Virtue or Mental Health. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Mark Pestana.
Okay, tonight we're going to talk about the nature of truth and truth-telling, and I've got a handout, and I have enough handouts for everybody, and you have to have a handout in order to follow the talk. Okay, there's about 30 points and 70 distinctions that we're going to make, and it's going to be impossible to follow if you don't have a handout. So there are two people passing them out now, and I don't want to get started until you actually have these in hand. So, moving right along, we're going to start with a definition of truth, and we're not asking, what does truth mean? We're not asking what is true, or we're not asking what claims about the world are true. We're just asking what truth as such means. And all the thinkers in the Catholic tradition have analyzed this notion as fundamentally relational and as some type of correspondence relation. Okay, so I want you to keep this in mind, that the truth has something to do with the correspondence between one thing and another. Now, if you look on this handout, everybody has one yet? My name is at the top there, and my email address is right underneath my name. If you have any questions or observations or points afterwards and you want to get them to me, go ahead and send me comments. But you can see there the meaning of truth means correspondence to reality, correspondence between one thing and another. And there are several types of truths. The fundamental truth or the basic truth is the divine truth, and this is simply the fact that God is truth. And that's the is of identity. And what that means is that God's reality corresponds with God's reality. God is perfectly self-identical, and there is no falsity in God in any sense whatsoever. Now, the Catholic metaphysicians call the concept of truth a transcendental. And it's called a transcendental by the metaphysicians because it is a concept that transcends the categories of being. The fundamental categories of being are substance and accident, and the transcendentals cut across all of those categories. And the idea here is, it's simple and sounds simple, is that being and oneness and goodness and beauty and truth don't mean the same, but they refer to the same reality. So just as God is being, God is truth. Now, the next type of truth that we want to call our attention to here is ontological truth, and this is the correspondence between a divine idea and a being. Everything is as God thinks it to be, and there's nothing in a being that God doesn't think is in a being. So there's a correspondence between a thing and God's idea of that thing. And insofar as the thing is as it corresponds to God's idea of it, it is. Now, rocks and trees and plants do a pretty good job of corresponding to God's idea of them. And the only beings that don't are beings with free will. We can talk about that. We'd actually talked about that in connection with the problem of evil. Now, closer to our topic for tonight, logical truth, what the moralists call logical truth, is the correspondence between a human idea and a fact. Perhaps it's tomorrow I go to work and it's snowing like mad outside, and I on my way to work I think to myself, it's snowing like mad. And it really is snowing like mad. Well, there's a logical truth there. There's a correspondence between the thought I formulate in my mind and the facts of the matter. Now, a verbal truth is a correspondence between words and facts. So perhaps I get to work and I walk in and let's say I work in our office is in the basement. There aren't any windows in the basement. I get to work late. My coworkers have been stuck down in the basement all morning long. They have no idea what's going on outside. And I tell them, hey, it's snowing like mad outside. Well, in this case, there's what we call verbal truth. There's a correspondence between my words and what is the case. Now, moral truth is also a correspondence relation, but that's a relation of correspondence between a human idea and the words that express those ideas. I have all kinds of ideas in my head that I don't give expression to in words. And when I give accurate expression to the ideas I have in my head in words, then we say there's verbal truth. Okay? Is okay so far? Okay. So what then is falsehood? Mr. Castelletto?
A lack of such correspondence.
Lack of such correspondence, exactly. So just go through and wherever there's no divine falsehood, but there can be ontological falsehood, there can be logical, verbal, and moral falsehoods, and those are just the negation of the correspondence relationship. Okay, now a couple of notes here. First, truths differ in degree of completeness, essentiality, depth, nobility, and importance, yes. Secondly, very important distinction, the false, it's a distinction between two distinctions. The false, as opposed to the true, is not the same as the partial truth as opposed to a whole truth. That's a very important distinction to remember. And it's, in a sense, that distinction is central to the whole philosophy of Thomas Aquinas. He never flat out denies any position as being false. What the position is, what the claim that someone makes is part of a total picture. Okay, and that's related to the next distinction there between apprehending a truth and comprehending the whole truth or a total truth. Now, point D here, this is important for our purposes later on. Truth is good. Okay, it's transcendental. All these terms refer to the same reality, so truth is good. Truth is a good both intrinsically, it's good in and of itself. Okay? People like finding out things. That's one of the primary motivating forces of science. It's making discoveries, finding out about reality feels good. It's human beings, all human beings seek to know, and they seek to know for its own sake. It's a very fulfilling experience to make a great discovery. So truth is good in and of itself, and truth is good for everything else we do. In order to function in the world, we have to know what's going on in the world. Our ideas have to be in correspondence with the world around us. Okay, now, armed with this set of notions, let's move on and equip ourselves with another set of notions that have to do with communication. This is part 2 on the outline. What does it mean to speak? What is speech? Okay, this is fairly standard, uncontroversial. Speech is conventional and natural signs, exchange of signs by which thoughts about facts are intentionally expressed and intentionally directed toward other persons who thereby come to know those facts. Okay, it's simple-minded, really. But here's the ideal or unideal communicative act. So what's going on here? Here's this thought I have formed in my mind. Okay, it's snowing outside. Here's the fact of the matter. It's snowing like the dickens outside. I get to work, and I put my thought into words. Okay, it's snowing outside. I make these sounds, and you hear those sounds, and that causes you to formulate in your mind a thought, oh, it's snowing outside. Well, yeah, okay. Now, there are truths here. My idea is true to the facts of the matter. My words are true to my thoughts. And now, your ideas are true to the facts of the matter, too. Okay? I mean, there's nothing to it, really. I mean, it's, how many times does this happen a day? It's, among all the human beings on the planet, it's a billion times a day this sort of thing happens. Of course. Now, why do we do this? Well, what kind of a question is that? I mean, what do you mean, why do we do this? How can you not do this? You can't not do this. Well, yeah, but why do we do it? Okay? See, that question is going to indicate to us what the good of it is. Okay, what's the good of it? Well, here we go. Boom, boom, boom. 1, 2, 3. To bring minds into correspondence with realities. Okay? I know it's snowing outside, and my coworkers don't. And suddenly they're apprised of a fact of the matter. It's how knowledge is spread. It's how knowledge is gained. It's how I got 90%, 99% of what I know. I got it from other people, conveying their thoughts about reality to me. The other function here, and this is, in some ways, it's even more fundamental, it has to do with calibrating our thoughts to reality. Suppose that Mr. Richard here has taken me out hunting, and we've set ourselves up. I'm behind this bush over here, and he's behind some rocks over there, and suddenly I see something over there, and I shout out to him, hey, there's a deer right in the bushes right over there. Do you see it, Rob? And then Rob's looking, he goes, that's not a deer, that's Mike Tober. And I look again, and yeah, it's Mike Tober if he's got his jackalope costume from Halloween on. And then you go, no, it's, and we start exchanging, we start doing this back and forth, one with the other, and then finally it's like, oh yeah, it is Mike. Let me hang on a second, I can still, okay, no, anyway, you get the idea. Do you see what I see? Do you hear what I hear? Did you just hear that noise? Is my tinnitus, or is there some strange, see what happens? What am I doing? I'm asking you if you're experiencing the same thing I'm experiencing, and then maybe you are, but it's different, and we go back and forth, and the reason we do that is that we're using the exchange of information to calibrate our ideas to what's out there. Okay, human beings, we have to do this. It's intersubjective validation is how we make sure our ideas are true to the facts around us. Okay, does that make sense? I mean, this is this reaches its apotheosis in a sense in the whole scientific community, which is there are 50,000 scientific journals where the scientists are doing precisely this. We did this experiment and it looks like this. No, we did this experiment and it looks like that. They go back and forth, communicating with each other in order to figure out what's going on. Calibrating the mind to the extramental reality. Okay, so functions of communication. Why is communication a good thing? Well, that's how we bring our minds into attunement with the facts around us. Now, once we've done that, then we can start coordinating our actions. We can't separate them that radically, okay? Because we have to coordinate our actions in order to calibrate our minds in the first place. But one of the functions of communication, you can consider it an abstraction, is to coordinate our actions with other people. Okay, so we interact in order to bring about some objective that we have in mind together. Okay? And in order to do that, we have to communicate with each other. Okay? And it's just, well, yes, of course. Tell us something we don't know. It's all so obvious. And then the third function there is to make known to others one's own inner experiences or states of mind. And this is a bonding function. Okay? I want you to know how I feel. I'm really upset. Maybe I'm talking to my wife and I tell her I'm really upset about what you said to me Saturday night. And then she says, well, I'm really upset about you being upset about that. And then I say to her, well, I'm really upset about you being upset about me being upset about that. Okay, so we're bonding. Okay, it's a type of bond. It's not talking is how you not bond, right? It's not saying anything to one another is how you don't bond. Okay, at any rate, that's why we do this sort of thing. Now, page 2 here. This set of presumptions here is very important. Presumptions, default attitude, unacknowledged assumptions, the tacit intentions, okay, what we just assume without ever, well, 99% of the time, without having to think about it, okay? First, what is said is heard, and what is heard is said. Okay, so you're hearing my voice now, and are you assuming that someone is saying the words you're hearing? Well, of course. Of course you are. Okay? 99% of the time, we just assume if I say something that it's going to be heard. And if I'm hearing something, someone's saying it. Okay? If I'm hearing something and then I think nobody's saying anything, I got a problem. Okay? Second presumption, and this is a little more controversial, I suppose, is that what is said and heard is the case. We just assume most of the time when people say things to us that what they say is the case. Okay? If somebody comes into and says it's snowing outside, I don't think to myself, is he lying to me? Is what he's saying inaccurate? It's not going to happen. Okay? And in a sense, it can't happen. If everything everybody said was problematized in that way, nothing's going to get off the ground. Okay? What is said is heard, and what is heard is said. And what is said and heard is the case. What is said and heard expresses the thoughts of the speaker. Okay? That's the case where if you come in and tell me it's raining out, I don't think to myself, there he goes again, lying to me. Okay? It doesn't happen that way. Okay? We assume most of the time when people speak to us that they're telling us what is on their mind. And then 4 and 5, the speaker assumes 1 through 3 of the hearer and assumes the hearer will assume 1 through 3 of the speaker. And the hearer assumes 1 through 3 of the speaker and assumes the speaker will assume 1 through 3 of the hearer. Okay? I'm assuming all this about you, you're assuming all this about me, and I'm assuming, blah, 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 back and forth. Okay? This is the foundation on which we communicate with each other. And number 6, the interlocutor is an adult of sound mind. It's not a child. It's not someone who's mentally defective. It's not someone who's insane. It's not someone who's mentally weak, someone who's radically uneducated. Okay? We're talking about the normal case, average case. Okay, now, okay so far? Okay. The second point there should have a 2 by it. Circumstances, roles, institutions, agents determine the meaning of conventional signs. So, in this part of the world, if you hear the sound dog, that means something. And if you hear the sound cat, that means something else. If you go to France or Spain and you make those sounds are not going to mean the same to those people there. Well, why? Well, that's just how it is. Okay? We take those sounds to refer to those sorts of animals. And we take that other sound to refer to another type of animal. Okay, that's what we do. Meanings of signs are socially established. Okay, language is public, it's not private. When were these meanings established? Nobody knows. It's lost in the mists of time. Okay, the only time the only occasion in which this sort of deliberately or explicitly happens that a meaning is socially established, so everybody agrees from now on we're going to mean such and such by such and such, is in the scientific community when new words are invented for new discoveries. Okay, and then the scientists will say, okay, from now on we're all going to call this potassium. Well, who says? Well, the scientific community says. Okay, so the meanings of the sounds are established by the people, the group, the society. Okay? And the users of the language all know what the words mean for us. All right. Now, equipped with all this, we're in a position where we can define when things go wrong. Number 3 here. What does it mean to lie? A lie is a verbal untruth. You can add that phrase there. Sometimes the moralists use that expression. A verbal untruth. It's a statement that is known to be contrary to thoughts. Contra mentum. Okay? It's an assertion that I make that I know ain't what I think. Okay? It's wittingly, willfully, and freely expressed. All right? Now we have to add that because if in my sleep I say, it's snowing like mad outside, and it's not, well, I'm not lying. Okay? I don't know what I'm doing. All right? And freely expressed, we have a neighbor, a dear little fellow. He has Tourette syndrome, and when he's not on his medication, he can go for 3 hours, just talking. Now, do his words express his thoughts? I suspect not. Okay, this is one of the aphasias. It's like the speech production mechanism goes into high gear, but there aren't thoughts behind it, or there's no correspondence between the thoughts and the words, but the person has no control over what's going on. Okay, that's not a lie. Now, in order to, okay, now the immediate or the proximate end of lying is to deceive. Lying and deceiving are two different acts. We got some problems here. I'll talk about that in a minute. What does it mean to deceive? It means to create a false belief in the hearer of the statement or the assertion. Okay, most of the time when people lie, they lie in order to deceive. Okay, but they're two different things, and they can come apart. Now, we've got some issues here already. St. Augustine defined a lie building in the intention to deceive into the definition. So for Augustine, a lie was a statement contrary to mind, uttered in order to deceive. That's all part of the definition of a lie. Thomas Aquinas does not include the intention to deceive in the definition of lying. Because it's lying if it's simply contrary to the mind, and freely and wittingly and whatever, posited. Okay, the Catholic tradition since Aquinas has followed Aquinas on this and has defined lying as making an assertion contra mentum, against the mind or contrary to one's thoughts. Okay, now, well, the second edition of the recent catechism goes back to the Augustinian definition, but we can talk more about that. Now, what happens in lying in order to deceive? We'll include them together now. The speaker intends to put the dupe's mind out of correspondence with the facts, and as a consequence, the dupe's actions are distorted vis-a-vis the facts. So here are the facts. The fact that X is Y, and that's supposed to be X, Y is. That is the case. But I say X is Z. You think X is Z. You hear X is Z. And then you think that. So maybe it's, I got to work late, and it's, the office is in the basement. I got there at 12 o'clock. I know you guys have absolutely no idea what the weather is outside, so just in order to have a little fun. It's not snowing outside, but I come in and I say, it's snowing like the dickens outside. And everybody gets up to run to see what's outside, and I'm giggling away at my jocose lie there. Well, what happened? My utterance was disconnected from my thought, and that caused my colleagues' thoughts to be disconnected from the facts. Okay, and it was successful in this case. Now, speaker can lie about extramental facts. The speaker can lie about his own thoughts, says, I believe that X is Y. A speaker can lie about his own words to say, look, what I'm telling you is true, when in fact it's not. Now, importantly, you see where we are on the list there under deceive? The liar assumes that the dupe assumes 1 through 6 above. Remember the presumptions? The liar has to assume that the hearer is still operating with those presumptions. Okay? Now, the liar conceals a lot. The liar conceals his thoughts about the facts. The liar conceals the disconnect between his thoughts and his words, the disconnect between his words and the facts. He conceals his awareness of that disconnect, and he conceals his intention to deceive the hearer, and he conceals his wish to conceal all this. Okay? So in this little lie, there's actually a lot going on. Oh, there's an outline of it there. When I lie in order to deceive and I know the facts, I don't speak my mind, I don't convey my thoughts to another who receives the wrong message. And, okay, part 3 here, page 3 here at the top. It says, it's possible to deceive without lying. Okay, so if one engages in feints or fakes or disguises, one can deceive somebody without strictly speaking lying. And it's possible to lie without deceiving. Okay, if everybody at work knows that my words are never to be trusted. Okay, here he goes again. And I come downstairs and I say, hey guys, it's snowing outside. And everyone just goes, yeah, okay. And they don't pay it any mind at all. Okay, I haven't succeeded in deceiving them. Why not? Because they know I never speak the truth. Okay, I still tell a lie. See, that's why Aquinas says that the lie, we have to define the lie in terms of the disconnect between the words and what's going on in the mind of the person. Now, if somebody falsely expresses thoughts out of ignorance or weak mind or haste, then he does not lie, since there's no willful or witting discontinuity between the expression of thoughts. Okay, that's pretty obvious. Now, I still lie in order to deceive when I'm mistaken about the facts. Okay, so suppose I get to work late, same scenario, down the basement office, and I'm thinking I'm going to play a trick on these guys, but I got delayed getting downstairs. I had to run over to the storeroom, blah, 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 and unbeknownst to me, it started snowing like the dickens outside. Okay, so I get there, and I'm convinced it's not snowing outside. Okay, it's quite sunny outside. It's actually snowing like the dickens, and I tell you, well, it's snowing like the dickens outside. What I say, my words are true, and you are apprised of a reality, right? Your mind is now in contact, correspondence with the facts. Have I lied? Yes, I have. There's still the disconnect between my words and my thoughts. Okay. Now speak. Okay. You see where the notes are in the middle of page 3 there? This is one you get. It's an old Jewish joke from Eastern Europe. It says, what if the speaker knows that the hearer knows that the speaker's a liar? Okay. What if? What if? So the way the old Jewish joke goes is that the two traveling salesmen, they both know that the other's a complete liar. Okay, so they don't believe anything the other one says. And the one is very angry, and he's accusing the other one. He says, you told me you were going to Minsk, so I would think you were going to Pinsk, but you really are going to Minsk, you liar, you. It's a little supposed to be funny, but and we see that in that case he would tell the truth in order to deceive. right? Now, actually, Augustine uses this example, but he wants to, it's an odd example. He says, suppose my friend never believes anything I say. It's an odd friendship. But suppose my friend never believes anything I say, and I know he's going to a town, and the road he's going to take has robbers on it. And I don't want him to take that road, but he knows I'm going to, he thinks I'm going to lie to him no matter what I say. So what do I say in this case? I tell him, there are no robbers on that road. So what does he think? There are robbers on the road, and there are robbers on the road, and that's how I keep him from going down there. So, I mean, this is a case where I tell a lie, but my intention is not to deceive. My intention is to bring the person's mind into correspondence with the facts. Okay, the literature on this is filled with these what-if cases, and you just reach a point where your head explodes because you don't know what to say. Well, here's another one. And the moralists aren't in total agreement about this one either. What if the hearer is an eavesdropper who has no business listening in? All right, so suppose we're back at work. I'm in my cubicle talking to you about a personnel issue that's coming up. And it's a little bit dicey personnel issue. And we're talking, and I need to tell you some things about what Jack's been doing the last Saturdays because there's some stuff has been coming up missing, whatever. And in the course of this, I realized that there's a fellow about 2 cubicles down who's obviously listening in. Okay? So we could just stop the conversation altogether, but we don't. And what I do in this case is I wink at you. I go, hey. And then I start winking, hey. And then you wink back, and then I say to you, Jack was not in the office last Saturday or any of the Saturdays before. Wink, wink, wink. Okay. So now you know that Jack was in the office last Saturday and all the other Saturdays before. But what does this eavesdropper think? Thinks he wasn't, right? Okay. So then the question is, have I lied to the eavesdropper? Well, good luck answering that one. It's some moralists will say, no, you haven't lied to the eavesdropper because your intentions, your communication is, your speech is not directed at the eavesdropper. Okay, the person your speech is directed towards knows the meaning of your words. Okay, and is not deceived, and granted, the context I've created by the winking, in a sense, I've changed the meaning of the words to their opposite. So what I'm saying is not contrary to my mind in this context. Okay? The eavesdropper is not part of that context. All right? Now, this is a tricky one because it seems as though I am possibly trying to deceive him, but you could argue, well, if he got up and stopped eavesdropping, that'd be fine with me. I'm not trying to communicate anything to him. Okay. At any rate, I'll leave that one with you. It's an interesting question. Okay. Now, D here on page 4. In all cases, A through C, we skipped the epistemic confidence case here, but that's not all that necessary for us. The speaker wills to preserve his knowledge and act accordingly. Okay, so the liar wants to hang on to, don't take the case where I'm mistaken. Take the case where I'm the one who knows what's going on. Okay, so I want to be able to act on the information I have. Okay, so my will is to preserve my knowledge and act accordingly, usually. Sometimes the speaker does not wish that X is Y and wishes that X is Z, all right? So, and says the opposite of what he thinks in order to convince himself, all right? So maybe I say to you, I am happy that I didn't get the promotion. I am, really. I'm happy I didn't get the promotion. It's better that I didn't get the promotion. It's better this way. Isn't it? Come on. Let's hear it. You agree with me, right? okay, in which it's as if in this case, the lie in order to deceive is part of an attempt to deceive myself. So what I'm trying to enlist your deception in my own deception. Okay, that happens sometimes, unfortunately. We try to get other people in on our attempts to deceive our own selves, and we do that by lying. Now, general provisos, number 4 on page 4. There are certain figures of speech, polite expressions, stereotype phrases, lines, formulaic expressions, sarcasm, ironic statements, etc., that aren't lies, since there's no intention to deceive, and, more importantly, everyone knows that these strict falsehoods mean something other than what they normally mean. Okay? I remember the first time I encountered sarcasm. I mean, this is a problem with being a philosopher, is you remember things like this. It was in, I think, 3rd or 4th grade. I was walking home with one of the older kids in our grade school, and we were hurling insults at this group across the street. And this older kid started saying, yeah, you're real smart. You're real smart. And I said, no, don't tell them that. No, that's not what we want to say to them. And then I got, it's like, oh, I get what he's doing. Wow, it was a great day for me. But these are examples. She's not at home, pleased to meet you. This won't hurt a bit. I have no money. If somebody comes up, you got any change? No, I don't have any change. Well, his question is short for, do you have any change that you would be willing to gift me with? Okay, they don't put it that way. And then I say, no, I don't have any change that I would be willing to gift you with. I don't include that part of the phrase, but everybody understands that that's what's there. Okay, so expressions like this the moralists don't regard these as being lies, although in some strict sense they're contrary to what the person is thinking. Okay, it's just, again, it has to do with what do people take these expressions to mean. Okay, now, are there gray areas? Yes, of course there are. Second, there are circumstances in which honesty is not expected. Everyone knows this. And consequently, lying in a sense is not even possible in those situations, since no one will be deceived. Feints, deceptions, stratagems, pretenses, disguises, and wars, games, playing a game of poker, or the street market. If you go into the street market in Istanbul and you expect the person selling you the junk to tell you the truth about the junk, that's your problem. I mean, you didn't read the sign. I mean, it's like over the street market is this big sign that says, "Abandon truth, all you who enter here." It's and that's part of the fun of it. So you look at this thing that the guy has, and he tells you it's a ancient artifact that was dug up in eastern Turkey. And you look on the bottom, it says made in China. And you say, well, it says made in China. He goes, oh, yes, the things that were imported across the Silk Road always said made in China on the bottom. I mean, it's ludicrous. And that's part of the fun of the banter that goes on in the street market. Okay, well, oh, they're lying to each other. Well, yes and no. I mean, it's a game. Okay, nobody thinks that the words are to be taken strictly in those sorts of contexts. Fictional narratives, stories, plays, statements by actors in theaters are not lies, since everyone realizes that assertions of truth are not being made. I go into a theater, I go into a comedy club, there's a stage there, and that means that what the people are saying it's not literal. They're not saying literal truths. Okay, everybody knows about Don Quixote and the windmills. So if it's Don Quixote at the puppet show, is a marvelous passage in the book where he's watching a puppet show about a woman being abducted, and he loses it. He thinks that the whole thing is real, and he pulls out his sword and he starts slashing away. I mean, it's just, he didn't realize that it was a fictional narrative. Okay. Now, page 5 here, motives for lying. This is, well, everybody knows this. Many moralists use the motives for lying as the principle for classifying lies into different types. First, out of carelessness, negligence, or thoughtlessness. Second type, out of concern for others. Amusement without malice, that's the jocose lie. Okay, so I tell you guys, it's snowing outside. It's like, oh, it's just fun, okay? Or to provide for others' needs. Okay, maybe I lie in order to help somebody out of a tight spot, or to make somebody feel good about the outfit they're wearing. I mean, that's the usual example that people use. That's mendacium officiosum. It's little lies of little consequence. There's been some interesting work by social psychologists on trying to study how much lying goes on, little lies of little consequence throughout the day. And the estimates are between 4 and 6. Everybody tells half a dozen little lies a day. And these are little, it might even be better to call them inaccuracies. Most of them are about, I think, 80% of them are about the liar, himself or herself. And then part C there, out of concern for one's own self, 3/4 of the little lies of little consequence, to provide for one's own needs, and impression management. Put a circle around that phrase there. That's the, to make oneself, it's not so much to make oneself appear better in the eyes of others, but what they have found is that these little lies they're like a social lubricant. It's a way of kind of minimizing differences or disagreements or conflicts between people. So it's as if people are kind of calibrating what they say they're feeling, what they say they think about something, to what other people feel or think about the same thing, just as a way of kind of going along to get along. It's like a social lubricant. And they say the little lies of little consequence, they sort of don't go anywhere. They make life a little easier, I guess, than if we were always sort of strictly, exactly honest. So if everybody likes the new Star Wars movie, then I might say, oh yeah, it's pretty good. It's kind of fun. Sure. Well, whatever you say. I didn't want to admit to Mike that I actually went to it last night, Mike. I'm so sorry. That's, anyway, to bring preferences, evaluations into agreement with others. Out of weakness or out of fear, to cover up wrongdoing. This is why most children lie. Did you pinch your sister? No. Are you telling me the truth? Yes. Okay, so to cover up wrongdoing, and then to cover up lying about wrongdoing. And then out of malice, the mendacium perniciosum. There are some people who just like to lie. And this is, actually Aristotle mentions this. He says there's some people who they like pulling the wool over people's eyes. It's odd, but it's malicious. It's a type of malice there. Tricksters, maybe not so merry. The bigger the trick you can pull on people, the bigger you can pull over people, the wool you can pull over people's eyes, the more fun it is, in a sense. And this is the type of lying that's condemned most soundly in Scripture. To dominate or control others, the liar has an edge in the power relationship, always. That there's a shift in power to the liar, because the liar's got something that you don't have. Okay, he's got a plus, and the dupe has a minus. The dupe is deprived of something. A couple of pathological versions of lying. The pseudologia fantastica is compulsive lying, uncontrollable. It's exhibited even when not in the liar's interest. Okay, that's the critical mark. There may be some of you know pathological liars. These are people who lie when they have no reason to lie. It's like, what are you lying about that for? What could you possibly stand to gain from lying about something like that? And nothing. They would actually stand to gain from telling the truth, and they still go ahead and tell the lie. Okay, that indicates that there's something really possibly pathological going on there. Or mythomania, excessive propensity to fabrication. Note, the more remote or anonymous the relation, the greater is the tendency to deceive. I think we all know that. Part 6, we can detect, we can skip that one. How to detect lying and deception. You have to engage in, figure out if there's a disconnect between what the person's thinking and what the person's saying. Now, you all know about the polygraph, and what's happened in recent decades, I attended one presentation on this, is the use of MRIs to detect lying. And they're working on this one 24/7. And it's a little crude right now, but it looks as though it might be better than the polygraph. You put the person in an MRI and ask them the questions you want to get the answers to, and you can tell by what goes on in the person's brain whether the person's telling the truth or not. Okay, it's quite something. Also, I'll mention this book. I feel a little reluctant to mention this. It's not particularly edifying, but it's called Never Be Lied to Again by David Lieberman. He is a specialist in this sort of thing. He's been hired by the FBI and the CIA he's not a water board specialist, but and he's been hired by police departments in the country to assist them in developing interrogation techniques. So training people what to look for to find out if people are, if there's a disconnect between what the person thinks and what the person says. So you can take a look at this. I've got a couple other things up here, but it's quite a fun read, I'll have to say. It's not edifying, but okay. Now, we're ready to address the moral issue here. Number 7 on page 6. The wrongness of lying and deceiving. And here, big divide, okay, in the moral traditions. Aristotle, Augustine, Aquinas, and Immanuel Kant, the great German Lutheran, the greatest of the Protestant philosophers, took the line that lying is never justified, it's never permitted, it's always wrong. Plato, the church fathers before Augustine, Origen, John Chrysostom, John Cassian, Clement of Alexandria, John Climacus, Hilary, all argued that lying is permitted to some people, some situations, some occasions. This tends to be the Protestant position. You get Hugo Grotius, Samuel Pufendorf were the first great Protestant thinkers to argue this. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Reinhold Niebuhr in the 20th century, Protestant theologians argued that lying is permitted in some circumstances. And the great secular utilitarian thinkers, Mill and Bentham, argued that deceiving people is permitted in some situations. Now, we'll split this in half. We'll talk about the wrongness of lying and then the wrongness of deceiving. First, the wrongness of lying in itself and not as a function of its effects. Okay, remember, the immediate effect of lying is to deceive someone. So considering lying just in itself as, what does lying just in itself consist of? The lack of correspondence between thought and words. Okay? Now, contramentum. First, here, this is Augustine's line here. This is the Augustinian position. God is truth, supreme being is supremely true, absolute truth is unchangeable, the infinite totality of all possible truths, it is logically impossible for God to lie. God the Father expresses himself in the divine word. The divine word expresses itself in creating the world. The eternal word expresses himself in his incarnation. And man is made in the image of God, especially insofar as man expresses himself in words and his being in action. Thus, by lying, a man destroys the image of God within himself. Cannot be avoided. A lie, by its very nature, is contrary to, it negates the image of God in man. That's why it's wrong. B, on top of that, God forbids lying repeatedly and unequivocally in Scripture. Christ abhorred lying and hypocrisy. Satan is the prince of lies and the father of all lies. Lying contradicts or negates the foundational good of truth. D, to lie is to use a natural function in an essentially disordered manner. This is Thomas Aquinas. Put his name by that one. Lying negates a natural human power. Okay? We don't communicate telepathically. We have to put our thoughts into words in order to communicate our thoughts with other human beings. That's just how we do it. That's how God made us. That's how nature made us. It's written into our very nature as being the beings we are. Okay? And when I lie I negate the act of lying by its very essence, negates the nature of that function, the nature of that power. So it negatives human nature. Lying causes disintegration of the speaker, destroys personal integrity, sunders the person into an inner and outer. Remember everything that the liar has to conceal? That's all going on inside. That ain't what you get. What you see is not me, what I'm lying. What you hear is not me. Lying offends the personal dignity of the speaker. The liar offends his own personal dignity. Lying negates the basis of communion with others. Okay, the sundering of the person into an inner and outer it negates the basis of communion between two subjectivities. Okay, I'm hiding my subjectivity from you when I lie to you. Okay, well, if I hide my subjectivity from you, then strictly speaking, we can't enter into communion as subjects. Lying negates the basis of communion with others. Communion with others is the self-revelation by the person to persons in speaking one's own thoughts, and thereby makes true communion impossible. Now, contemporary Catholic philosopher Chris Tollefson has argued this. He's just come out with a book a year ago on this, and it's quite exciting, the work that he's doing. No, we have a moral duty to speak the truth if we communicate. Keep that in mind. Now, B, the wrongness of deceiving. This is on page 7. In itself, or as determining the wrongness of lying. See, people like the utilitarians. Utilitarianism is the view that an act is good if it has the best consequences, produces the greatest happiness for the greatest number. Okay, so an act is wrong if it has bad consequences. So lying is wrong if it has bad consequences, and the consequence of lying is deceiving others. So lying will be wrong, according to this school of thought, insofar as deceiving is wrong. It'll work backwards. Okay, now it says A there, it says lying is socially harmful. Cross that out and write deceiving. Okay, deceiving is socially harmful since communication between human beings is essential to social life, and communication essentially entails transmission and reception of accurate accounts of others' beliefs. Okay. We can't communicate. If you don't tell me what's on your mind, we're not communicating. We're not communicating. We can't do this social living thing. We can't do it. B, deceiving causes suspicion, mistrust, breakdown of confidence between people. Okay, little boy who cried wolf. What happened to him? Nobody believed him. We teach this one to kids. We get it from the get-go. Being deceived offends the dignity of the hearer. People have a right to the truth if spoken to. Being deceived violates justice if the hearer has a right to the information being withheld by the lie. Okay? So we're not talking about the Nazis coming to my door. We're talking about the Grand Rapids police coming to my door and asking me about the criminal that's wanted who's hiding in my garage. Are you hiding a criminal in your garage? Well, they have a right to know that. And I violate justice if I lie to them. Okay? Now, Part C here. The people who have argued that the wrongness of lying and deceiving has to do primarily with the wrongness of lying, although Aquinas says that lying is wrong and deceiving is wrong, in a sense, for all the reasons listed here. But the Catholic moral tradition regards lying to deceive as intrinsically venial. It's always wrong, but in and of itself, it is a venial wrong. Objectively, it is venial and not grievous. It diminishes charity in the soul, but it does not obliterate sanctifying grace, considered in and of itself. Speaking contramentum. It becomes grievously wrong as a function of the circumstances, the person who's being lied to, the liar, results. Okay, if it's a big lie, if it's a lie about something important, then it may very well be mortally wrong. Okay, so that's important to remember. Catholic moral tradition is that lying is always wrong. It's intrinsically wrong, essentially wrong, never permitted. But in and of itself, it is an objectively venial wrong. Okay? Now, part D here, this is very problematic. The dominant position in the Catholic tradition is that the wrongness of lying is not based on a right to the truth in the hearer. That's a Protestant idea. Okay? There's a problem here, though. The first edition of the recent Catholic Catechism, came out in 92, defined a lie as speaking an untruth with the intent to deceive someone who has a right to truth. The second edition of the Catholic Catechism that came out 5 years later deleted the phrase to someone who has a right to the truth and went back to the traditional view among Catholic moral theologians. Now, you get this in Hugo Grotius and Samuel Pufendorf. They define a lie as speaking, contrary to the mind, in order to deceive someone who has a right to know what's going on. That's how they define lying in the first place. Okay? So if the person doesn't have a right to know what's going on in the first place and you speak contramentum, you are not, strictly speaking, even lying. Okay? It's not that it's okay to lie in a situation like that. It's that you're not even lying in the first place. Okay? Does that make sense? No. Okay. See, we'll talk about what happens in the extreme cases. You can say lying is permitted in some cases. Okay. Or you can say lying, it's not that lying is permitted in those cases, it's that in those cases you aren't even lying in the first place. Why? Because you're speaking an untruth to someone who doesn't have a right to that truth in the first place. Okay? That's not the Catholic position. Okay? Is that any better? I don't know. I just said the same thing over again. But here's the Catholic critique of this idea that the wrongness of lying is based on a right to the truth in people who are hearing what is said. Okay? Here's the Catholic criticism of that claim. Here it is. If someone has no right to truth, then anything may be said to that person. Okay, I guess that makes sense. Listeners would have to assure themselves that I recognize their right to truth before they could believe me. That's actually a good point that they make. Does that make sense? See, if the wrongness of lying is based entirely on your right to the truth, then when I'm talking to you, you have to make sure that I recognize your right to the truth before you know whether to believe me or not. And that would be true of everybody. And then the Catholic moralists claim if that was the case, you couldn't get the communication off the ground. Okay. Those with dominion over others could lie freely to them. And this is the one that the moral theologians think clinches it, God could lie freely to human beings since we have no rights over God. If the wrongness of lying is based entirely on a right to the truth in the hearer, then God could lie to us. It's not possible that God lied to us. It's logically impossible. Okay. E at the bottom of the page. The duty to speak the truth does correlate with the right to the truth, but both the duty to speak the truth and the correlative right have the same basis. And the duty to speak the truth is not the same as a duty to speak in the first place, and a right to the truth is not a right to know everything that's on someone's mind. Okay? Keep all that in mind. Now, here we go. Everybody's been waiting for the Nazis. Okay? What about The case in extremis, Nazis have come to the door. It's Corey ten Boom. Do you have any? Are you hiding Jewish people in your house? Another case there was a Jewish woman lived next door to a Dutch woman. A lot of cases from the Dutch here of this, and the Jewish woman asked the Dutch woman if she would. The Dutch woman had about 6 kids, and the Dutch woman had 1 child. She said, "Would you take my child and keep your child with your kids?" Yes, fine. So the little kid went and lived next door with the Christian family, and the woman was the Jewish woman was picked up about 3 weeks later, and one of the guards doing this came over to the woman who had the kid and said, "Are all these children yours?" She lied. She said, "Yep, they are." Okay. What about the extreme cases? Are there circumstances in which one may lie to deceive in order to protect one's own innocent life? You got to add innocent there. If I just shot up Woodland Mall and went home, and I'm sitting at home, and the police come to the door and they say, "Did you just shoot up Woodland Mall?" Well, I can't lie to protect myself. Okay, I'm bound to turn myself in. I didn't really do that. Okay, I'm just a terrible example. Or to save other innocent lives. Can such an end justify the means? Okay, this is what first response there. People always, everywhere, instantly call attention to such situations when the morality of lying is under consideration. Okay, and I'll say, I'm going to change this here. College students always instantly call attention to such situations when the morality of anything is under consideration. Okay, so in my ethics class, I say, well, in general, we have to protect people's property, and I see a hand go up and say, what about somebody who's starving to death? Okay. And I say, well, in general, we should avoid killing other people, and I see the hand going up in the back. Well, what if the terrorists have a nuclear bomb in New York City, and you blah, 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 and you fill in the whole story? Okay, I mean, it's just, this has happened enough to make me suspicious of the appeal to the extreme case. Okay, it's the instant tendency to go to the extreme cases is serving some kind of psychological function. It's like a defense mechanism. Okay. Okay, anyway, keep that in mind. The frequency and seriousness of such cases have been exaggerated. Maybe not anymore. I suppose it depends on where you live. But the third point here is the first thing that the moralists call attention to. If the lying is justified by the extremity, then any behavior is justifiable under extremity. You just amplify the extremity. Okay? They really do have a nuclear bomb in New York City. And they're going to blow it up unless, and then just fill in whatever atrocity you can think of. Okay. Kant said, let justice be done even if the world perish. There has to be some kind of stopping point. There always seems to be some other way out. Maintain silence, evasion, distraction, dissuasion, conversion from your evil ways. You Nazis are all off base, okay? Or it may be the time to make a stand. It's, they're here, and you're not getting them, okay? If you saw this movie back in the 1950s about Bernadette Soubirous with Jennifer Jones, I can't remember the name of the movie, but Song of Bernadette, there's a great scene in it where it's fictional, but at least I think it's fictional, but they come to get Bernadette from the house, and the priest is standing at the door. And he tells them, yes, she's inside, and your path to her lies over my dead body. And that does it. I mean, maybe that would work. It's important to remember that whatever somebody does in one of these extreme cases, subjective responsibility is diminished when acting in extreme cases. It's diminished by ignorance. You're put under a lot of pressure. You have to think, okay, what do I say? I don't know what to say. I didn't have time to, I didn't prepare for this. So in a sense, I'm acting out of ignorance. I don't know what to do in a situation like this. Well, that diminishes my subjective responsibility. And I'm acting under extreme duress. Okay? It's the Nazis, okay? These guys are mean. Okay? And they're interrogating me at my front door here. Good grief. Subjective responsibility is diminished in cases like this. And the goodness of the end aimed at or the evil avoided diminishes the wrongness of the wrong means. Lying is always wrong. It's a venial wrong. Objective veniality admits of degrees. So this woman who said, yeah, the kid is mine. She told a lie. She shouldn't have done it. Okay. How wrong was it? Well, it was this wrong. If she did something wrong, her subjective responsibility is something different. That's diminished in this case. Okay, so not only is her subjective responsibility diminished, but the wrongness of her deed is pretty minuscule. And a Christian may not deny Christ. Okay. So we don't have to talk about the Nazis anymore. We can talk about what's happening in northwest Iraq. And it's happening. I talked to Professor Hogg about this. It just happened within the last month. The father was picked up by ISIS and he was told to deny Christ, tell a lie, and he didn't do it. So they chopped off his little boy's fingers. And they said, deny Christ, and he wouldn't do it. And they chopped off some more fingers, and then they beheaded the two of them. There were 4 15-year-olds last fall in northwest Iraq. They were told, deny Christ. Here's the extreme, in extremis. What are you going to do? Protect an innocent life, your own life. The 4 15-year-olds, they were told, deny Christ, or we're going to chop your heads off. And they didn't. They wouldn't do it. And they got their heads chopped off. So, I mean, the extreme for Christians is deny Christ. You deny Christ right now, or we're going to chop your children up in front of you. Well, God says, don't deny me. That's that. I mean, it's live not by lies. That's. I've got a copy of the article here. That's what Solzhenitsyn wrote. It was the last thing he wrote before he was kicked out of the country. It was dated the day the KGB arrested him. And he said, it's got to stop. We've got to stop telling lies, no matter what the cost. Okay. Secrets. The moral law obliges truthful communication, and it also obliges concealment of what one knows. Well, wait a minute. It's a flip side. Okay? The moralists always talk about keeping secrets. The morality of keeping secrets goes with the morality of truth-telling. And they make an important distinction between 3 types of secrets. The principle of classification is not the same here, but the natural secrets, the subject matter or the topic is naturally private, it's naturally confidential. If the information is found out, then you're bound to keep it secret simply because of the content, the topic. Okay, family matters, medical vitals, military facts, freedom of the press does not abolish natural secrets. Second, secrets of promise. You already have the information. You already know this about somebody or something, and they ask you, would you please not tell anybody? And you say, I promise I won't tell anyone. But you've already got the information. Okay. Now, the obligation is based on, it's grounded in the agreement you've made, the contract you've made with the person. The moral necessity is imposed by the promise. So it's a duty of fidelity. The secret of trust is, in a sense, the most important. If it's a natural secret, that's a secret of trust, then you have the strongest obligation to keep it secret. In a secret of trust, the person says to you, I got to talk to you about something, but you got to promise me not to tell anybody about it. And you agree to that. So you don't get the information, in a sense, until you've already promised not to divulge it. And then you get the information. Okay, so that's the secret of trust. Does that make sense, the difference between them? Now, the moral obligation of the secret depends on what type of secret it is. It's to not reveal the secret that one possesses. It's not to attempt to discover secret information possessed by someone else. And it's not to use secret knowledge unjustly obtained. Why? Where does this obligation come from? What's the basis of the obligation? Well, yes, human beings are social animals. We live with other human beings. We need other human beings. But human beings are also private individuals, private individual persons. And we don't need to know everything about each other in order to work with each other and to bond together. And protection against hostile individuals and hostile groups is sometimes necessary. Now, what are the exemptions of the obligation to keep secrets? We all know what these exemptions are, and they involve conflicts of rights and duties between the secret holder and the one to whom this promise is made, or the one about whom the secret is about, the one whom the secret is about. And that's pretty straightforward. We can skip that. We already know a lot of that. Mental reservation. Number 12 on page 10 here. Now, if I am directly questioned about information to which an inquirer has no right, and I'm obliged to not reveal that information, okay, so I've got some facts that I'm obliged to not reveal, then I may refuse to answer. I can't talk to you about this, okay, or I may practice evasion, talk about something else, distraction, distract the questioner, let's go on to something else. Or I may practice mental reservation. This is a problematic notion. It's gotten a bad rap in the history of ethical thought. It's limiting the sense of words to part of what is thought. Now, strict mental reservation, no clue is given as to the meaning of the words. Words, circumstances, manner of speech are not used to convey thoughts in a conventional manner in any way whatsoever. It's used in an entirely private sense, thus a moral lie is a lie and is morally forbidden. Okay, so there's been a problem at work. Somebody's been dipping in the till. I'm the one who's been dipping in the till, and the boss says to me, "Are you the one dipping in the till?" And I say, "No, I'm not the one dipping in the till. But what I mean by that is, yes, I am the one dipping in the till." See, that's my own private meaning to those words. What do you mean? What do you mean mental reservation? That doesn't cut it. Okay, there's nothing in what I said that could lead someone to believe, lead someone to what I'm thinking, lead someone to what I believe. Now, broad mental reservation. We've got a classic example here. Some clue is given in the words used or in the circumstances or in the manner of speech that actually reveals the thoughts. However, they're not noticed by the hearer, who makes an inference to another meaning. The speaker has the intention to deceive or not, but the hearer deceives himself. It's permitted by the moral law if and only if the inquirer has no right to that information and it's necessary to guard the secret. Okay, now the most famous example of this, and they always cite this, anybody know this one? St. Athanasius was being pursued by people who were looking for him there, and they were going to arrest him and bring him in, and he was on a boat, or he was on a road right beside the Nile River, and they stopped and asked him, have you seen, you know where Athanasius is? And he said to them, "He's not far from here." Pretty good. Did he speak the truth? Yes, he did. Did he speak what was on his mind? Well, sure. Okay. Now, his hearers said thanks, and then they took off. Okay. So, did he intend to deceive them or not? I mean, in a sense, what they did with what he said was their concern. That's sort of the classic example of a broad mental reservation. And that's permitted if the information has to be not divulged. Okay. However, then they make a proviso here. They said the indiscriminate use of the broad mental reservation breaks down communication. And for years I worked with the man, he was the head of our unit, and he was really good at this. I mean, and you couldn't get a straight answer out of that guy. I mean, I'd go in with a list of questions. It's like, I need to talk to you about some things at this point. And I'd say, well, at this point in my career, would it be good for me to do this? And the review's coming up, and he'd talk, and there were words coming out of his mouth. I know there were, but and I would thank him, And then afterwards, I think, like, now, what exactly did he say? I mean, I could not make sense out of it. I mean, it was quite something. But it was a perfect example of indiscriminate use of broad mental reservation and what happens. Okay, you can see how that works there. A couple other things I want to just call your attention to quickly at the end here. Truthfulness as a virtue. This is in Romano Guardini. I recommend that to you. It's a disposition to the truth, but and to speak the truth when the occasion calls for it. Or when there's an incentive or some motive to not speak the truth. If it's raining outside and I tell you, gee, it's raining outside, I'm not a particularly honest man for enunciating truths like that. Okay, honesty is exemplified when there's an incentive or something to gain from not being honest. If I'm still honest in that case, that's what honesty is. Okay? But it also involves, and I think in number 5 and 6 there, I want to call your attention to it, involves charity for those to whom the truth is communicated. Okay? One of the vices that's opposed to veracity is in number 14 in the middle there, rash loquacity, indiscretion, being a blabbermouth. I've always wanted to tell you what I think of you. Okay? I think there are some people like this. There aren't a lot of them. Thank you, Lord. But it's kind of a contrary vice to veracity. It's being rude. That's not, being honest does not mean being rude. And it involves prudence, to know whom should be told what, where, and when. Now, the vices opposed to veracity: mendacity, insincerity, dishonesty, being a liar, being untruthful, disposition to lie or deceive whenever there's an incentive to do so. You just go for it. Second nature, it's habit. But then there's another vice, which is a taciturnity. I don't know if that's a word, but it sounds great. Secretiveness, refusing to speak. Person who never says anything, even when the occasion calls for speech or conversation. Social impact of lying. This gets back to the Live Not by Lies piece by Solzhenitsyn. It's number 15 here. There's a lot to talk about here, but we'll just kind of run through it. A critical mass of mendacity among the citizens in a civil society and or from the political authorities in that society causes the cathedra mendaci, that's a throne of lies. When the political authority becomes cathedra mendaci, a throne of lies, that causes lying to become contagious because of the continuous exposure to examples, especially to examples of public personages. The presumptions, remember those 1 through 6 presumptions of communication way back at the beginning? It causes them to decline somehow or degenerate until they no longer operate. And then no one believes any statement made by anyone about any topic. And words lose their meaning and the capacity to convey thoughts. Veracity ceases to be a virtue in a society. This can happen. You can have a person who's devoid of a virtue, and you can have a whole society that's devoid of a virtue. I think a good example of that, of a society that in which there are certain virtues completely absent, was when the Jesuits, when Isaac Jogues and Gabriel Almond and the Jesuits first encountered the Mohawk Indians. The historians say that the Mohawk Indians had been at war with their neighbors for about 600 years. And extraordinary, warlike, militaristic society. And did they have the military virtues? You bet they had the military virtues. John Kagan said that some of the finest soldiers in world civilization were the Mohawk Indians. Were the tender virtues present in that society? No. They were utterly lacking in any of the tender virtues. Okay? I mean, when Isaac Jogues ran the gauntlet, the grandmothers would be out there pounding on him with sticks. So, I mean, there's a case where you have a society in which there's the simple certain virtues are simply missing altogether. And that can happen with veracity. Everyone is lying to everyone all the time about everything. Social interactions disintegrate because suspicions are continuously aroused. Mutual confidence is subverted since everyone is a confidence man. Trust breaks down. All actions become self-protective. The very distinction between truth speaking and lying breaks down, and people become oblivious to the fact of universal mendacity. That's why Solzhenitsyn wrote the books he wrote. It was as if people were so used to lying that they weren't even aware of the fact anymore that what they were saying was so dishonest. And the human mind severs its connection with reality, since corroboration of one's thoughts by and with others is impossible. And that is actually what the psalmist prays against. It's, in my distress I cried to the Lord, and he answered me, O Lord, deliver me from lying lips and from the deceitful tongue. What shall God give to thee, or what shall he add to thee, O deceitful tongue? The sharp arrows of the warrior and the glowing embers of the broom plant. Woe is me that I tarry in Mosach, that I dwell in the tents of Kedar. Too long have I dwelt with them who hate peace. When I speak of peace, they want war. And then Psalm 11. Help, O Lord, for faithful men are no more. Faithfulness has died out among men. Everyone tells lies to his neighbor. They speak with flattering lips and an insincere heart. May the Lord destroy all deceitful lips, the boastful tongue, such as say, we are heroes with our tongue, our lips are our own, who is Lord over us? Because of the misery of the oppressed and the groaning of the poor, I will now arise, says the Lord. I will bring salvation to him who desires it. The words of the Lord are sincere words, as silver tried in fire, purged from dross, purified 7 times. Thou, O Lord, will keep us and preserve us from this generation forever, although the wicked strut around us and the vilest of men exalt themselves.